Sergeant Valen Ryder hadn't planned on becoming the universe's most wanted war criminal for weaponizing dad jokes, but fate and a Drakthur plasma cannon had a twisted sense of humor. One moment, she was breaching a meat-textured bulkhead on the Drakthur warcruiser Sanctity of Obedience with her SEAL team, and the next, she was watching her left arm disappear in a shimmer of blue light, followed by the dull realization that her wristwatch had also been vaporized. "Guess I'm running out of time," she quipped, as the alien medic leaning over her promptly suffered a neural crash so intense it triggered his species' version of cardiac stasis, which, for the record, involves screaming through 12 eye sockets and pooping out of 2. Ryder, bleeding profusely and grinning like a caffeinated lunatic, used her teeth to tie off the scorched flesh with her own bootlace, ignoring the automated distress beacon pinging from her suit like a nervous intern. Her team stared in horror, as she then used her severed arm, retrieved because she liked the watch, as a blunt object to knock out a charging Drakthur zealot mid-sermon. "Talk to the hand!" she shouted, before cackling like a sitcom villain on R&R. The boarding mission, which was supposed to be a 23-minute precision op, descended into full-blown psychological chaos as Drakthur soldiers began surrendering. Not from injury, but from metaphysical confusion. One warrior wept openly after Valen winked and said, "Looks like someone needs a hand with their existential dread." Command wanted to evac her. Her squad wanted to sedate her. The enemy wanted to build a religion around avoiding her. But Ryder, powered by an intravenous line of espresso from her combat flask and a growing addiction to her own punchlines, led the charge through a corridor of bioluminescent horror while mocking the ship's architectural choices. "Nice bone." "Ceiling. Do all your buildings look like colonoscopy footage? Or is this just a weekend place?" The ship's AI tried to process her sarcasm, glitched, and triggered a full lockdown protocol labeled humor-induced system panic. She laughed harder. The cruiser's bridge, an over-designed circle of mucus glass panels and moral superiority, fell. When she walked in mid-monologue about losing custody of her arm in a messy divorce with Captain Consequences. The commanding priest general of the vessel attempted to declare a holy duel, but his voice cracked halfway through his speech when Valen blew him a kiss, using her prosthetic hand clutched in her remaining one. "I'm armed for peace," she said, and the Drakthur command crew laid down their weapons in what was legally classified as shame surrender. News spread fast. Faster than light, in fact, thanks to a viral clip titled "Woman Destroys Empire," with barely a limb and no shame. Galactic High Command called her behavior morally degenerate. She called them emotionally constipated Twinkies. Earth's delegation, chewing popcorn in the back row, just nodded sagely and muttered, "Classic Tuesday." Back aboard the USS Verbal Warning, her squad debrief looked more like a trial. Lieutenant Graal Zen, a floating jellyfish in a beret, filed his 70-second complaint on her abusive irony payloads. Corporal Grunt, their medic, asked her, again, if using sarcasm was a trauma response. Valen smiled, sipping burnt espresso brewed directly from her still-glowing cybernetic stump. "Oh, sweetheart," she said. "This is my therapy." Commander. Drelth Varnock, whose once fabled battle instincts had been replaced with migraines and muscle twitches, simply slid his resignation letter into a drawer already overflowing with unprocessed war crimes paperwork. And through it all, Valen grinned, the kind of grin that says, "I'm missing an arm and moral filter, and I'm just getting started." Outside, the universe shifted, slightly but perceptibly, around her. Alien dignitaries began whispering about the one-armed Punisher. Fleets were reassigning morale officers to emotional shielding duty, and the Drakthur Empire, once united by doctrine, was now hosting internal inquiries titled Jokes, Tactical Threat, or Philosophical Virus. The war wasn't over, but something worse than war had begun. Comedy. As Ryder cleaned the blood off her coffee mug and duct-taped a smiley face onto her prosthetic socket, she turned to her squad and said, "Ready to disarm more fascists?" No one laughed. That was the point. The War Council of the Drakthur Empire hadn't convened in 500 cycles, not because there wasn't war, there always was, but because nothing had ever required discussion. Until Sergeant Valen Ryder. Now, the Council of Obedient Flame sat in a sacred chamber of bone, wringing their many appendages over psychological carnage caused not by weapons-grade plasma, but by one human woman's relentless barrage of wordplay. Meanwhile, aboard the USS Verbal Warning, Valen Ryder was busy using her detached prosthetic hand as a pointer stick in a tactical briefing, casually slapping the holomap every time she wanted to emphasize a target. This is the reactor core. Gonna be hotter than my last Tinder date. And this, slap. This is their holy relic chamber. Think Vatican meets a Hot Topic clearance bin. Her squad winced audibly. Lieutenant Graal Zen floated behind her, silently updating his Death Wish journal. Even the ship's AI, SPORF, Strategic Protocols of Reasoned Firepower, had begun audibly sighing every time she opened her mouth. But Valen didn't care. In fact, she was thriving. The after-action reports on her last mission had become required. Reading for psychological warfare divisions. Alien analysts were breaking down her jokes with the intensity normally reserved for ancient prophecies. Terms like critical pun trauma and mimetic shrapnel were now official entries in the Galactic Arbitration Corps' emergency playbook. Despite the bureaucratic meltdown, the peacekeeping fleet had no choice but to put her back in the field, mostly to keep her away from morale-sensitive zones like hospitals, diplomatic summits, and children's programming. Her next mission? To storm a Drakthur command station orbiting the dead moon of Irnax 5, a station known for strict silence, ritual chants, and vaporizing people who interrupted their sacred PowerPoint presentations. Valen arrived mid-prayer, kicked open the chapel doors with her boot and yelled, "Knock, knock! Who's armed and fabulous?" The resulting wave of spiritual nausea among the Drakthur priests short-circuited their neural chant grid, which caused every door in the facility to either open, close, or just scream in binary. Valen strolled in backwards, firing her sidearm with one hand and holding up a holographic meme of herself giving a thumbs up with the other. "Might I interest you in a tactical surrender and some light roast?" she said, ejecting a fresh cup of coffee from her arm. The priests broke formation. Several fled. One threw himself into a void portal while muttering, "The puns, they echo in eternity." Her squad followed close behind, trying to maintain professionalism while dodging collapsing architecture and sonic booby traps triggered by laughter. Corporal Grunt attempted to reassert military order, but was cut off when Valen body-slammed a 6-armed Drakthur monk while screaming, "I forearm you not to resist." The monk didn't even fight back. He just went limp and whispered, "Please make it stop." Commander Varnock, observing via comlink, watched in stoic horror as the entire enemy base began tearing itself apart, not from battle damage, but from mass resignation. One priest started eating his own war manual. Another began apologizing to the ceiling. Valen reached the control core, casually sat on the reactor node, and sent out a broadcast on all open channels. "This is Sergeant Valen Ryder of Earth. I'm currently occupying your precious command altar and considering redecorating. Any suggestions? Maybe something a little less fascist?" The response came in a garbled panic from a Drakthur Rear Admiral. You are in violation of Cosmic Code 77B, Prohibition Against Psychological Tampering Through Humor." She leaned into the mic, sipped her coffee, and said, "Yeah? Well, I hereby invoke the Sacred Earth Clause, Article 1, subsection YOLO." She then detonated a pun so vile, I guess you could say I left them, speechless, that 3 fleets went radio silent for 46 minutes. The command station's reactor went offline, not from sabotage, but because the AI refused to power something that stupid anymore. Valen exfiltrated under a rain of confused tears and spontaneous policy rewrites. By the time her shuttle returned to the Verbal Warning, new orders awaited her. The Galactic Council had officially declared sarcasm a cultural contaminant and classified her as a mimetic hazard. Earth's response? Promote her. Give her a squad. and put her in charge of experimental morale disruption tactics. As she sat in her bunk that night, arm recharging, sipping hot espresso while humming old Earth jingles, she muttered, "They wanted silence. I gave them punchlines. Poor bastards never stood a chance." And somewhere, in the void of space, an alien therapist began screaming into a pillow labeled, "War is no laughing matter." They told her the mission was impossible. That was before they realized she'd already accepted it, packed 3 mugs of coffee, and loaded her arm's emergency pun launcher. Sergeant Valen Ryder now stood at the edge of the diplomatic neutral zone on the crusty asteroid known as Kreltak 7, staring down the most notorious war criminal in the galaxy, Lord Chaktar Vornul, a 3-headed supremacist who ran ideological purification campaigns, genocide seminars, and once held a TED Talk titled, "Why Emotions Are for Weaklings and Garden Slugs." All 3 of his faces scowled from different emotional spectrums, rage, confusion, and mild lactose intolerance, as Valen sauntered into the chamber, sipping a macchiato and spinning her detached hand like a fidget toy. "Ladies and gentlemen, and whatever the hell you are," she chirped, "I'm here to disarm you, literally, emotionally, probably grammatically." The council chamber fell silent as the alien tribunal watched in stunned disbelief. This was supposed to be a somber war crimes tribunal, but Valen had entered like it was open mic night at the comedy gulag. She walked up to Vornul, placed her cyberarm gently on the lectern like a church offering and said, "3 heads and not 1 sense of humor. What's the matter, boys? Lose the funny bone in evolution's clearance sale?" Vornul's central face sneered, the left one twitched, and the right whispered to no one, "She's doing it again." The court interpreter, a trembling beetle thing with a PhD in trauma translation, started sobbing. Valen leaned in. "Tell me, do all 3 of you feel pain individually, or do I get a bulk discount?" She then opened her arm panel, pressed a button labeled Cringe Barrage, and let fly a string of weaponized puns about limbs, surrender, and heads rolling. "This is how we disarm dictators," she grinned, right as her mechanical hand rocketed off and slapped Vornul's center. Face with surgical precision, the chamber erupted. Well, not in applause, but in some blend of spiritual collapse and legal panic. Galactic Arbitration Corps officers began flipping through rulebooks that didn't account for assault via detachable pun. Vornul tried to counterattack with a graviton lance, but tripped over his own ceremonial cape, while Valen ducked behind a podium made of 80% self-respect and 20% fragile tradition. She popped up, dodged a psychic scream, and yelled, "Nice try, meatloaf." "Hydra, but I'm immune to whining. I have a toddler." Then she vaulted off the bench, landed on the prosecutor's desk, and fired a laser pointer from her cyberarm into the war criminal's third eye. "Gotcha!" she shouted, as the light burned an emoji into his retina. That's when the audience broke. Dignitaries fainted. One veteran Drakthor warrior stared into the void and murmured, "She fights with narrative sabotage." Even the galactic broadcast feed had to cut out mid-transmission, citing existential interference. Vornul, now sobbing and drooling, from 2 of his faces and trying to sue for psychological violation with the 3rd, begged for asylum in the only way his culture knew, ritual vomiting on the floor. The tribunal immediately declared a mistrial. But the real trial began when the Galactic Command had to explain how one human commando had defeated a centuries-old propagandist warlord using coffee, sass, and a detachable limb. Valen, for her part, simply walked out of the chamber humming the MASH theme and twirling a pen that had technically been stolen from a war crime exhibit. When reporters asked how she felt about causing the galaxy's first case of diplomatic PTSD through comedy, she shrugged. "They told me to bring peace. I brought inner peace by making them wish they were never born." Her superiors tried to reprimand her, but failed when the evidence logs triggered uncontrollable giggling in half the command staff. And so, command did the only logical thing left. They created a new unit, the RIOT Squad, Resilience Inhumane Offensive Tactics. Ryder was its first commander. Its motto, offend, confuse, overthrow. Recruits would be trained in sarcasm conditioning, irony fatigue tactics, and close-quarters pun deployment. She was given a ship, a squad, and a budget for weaponized coffee. As the galaxy collectively braced for mimetic annihilation, Valen stood on the deck of her new cruiser, the Rude Awakening, and watched holographic headlines scream, "Galactic Warlord crumbles from pun." She grinned, blew a kiss to the stars, and whispered, "Next stop, complete moral collapse." By the time the RIOT squad launched its first official mission, the galaxy had already declared Valen Ryder a Class 7 cultural contaminant and instituted new planetary defense systems that included earplugs, sarcasm filters, and mandatory joke awareness seminars. None of it helped. Her ship, the Rude Awakening, dropped out of hyperspace over the planet Vlorthun, a bureaucratic fortress world so obsessed with order that they issued licenses for blinking and required weekly emotional audits. Valen took one look at the planet's orbital signage, "Silence is strength, laughter is treason," and immediately opened a broadcast on all channels. "Hey Vlorthun, knock knock." A pause. "Who's there?" the AI finally answered, confused. "Armageddon." "Armageddon who?" "Armageddon, real tired of your fascist architecture." Within 2 minutes, the planet's AI defense grid shut down out of embarrassment. Her team, consisting of a caffeine-addicted xenolinguist, a disgraced alien stand-up comic, and a sapient mop named Gerald, parachuted into the capital with energy shields powered entirely by shame deflection algorithms. Valen landed in the central plaza mid-cartwheel, spraying espresso mist from her bionic arm's built-in dispenser while yelling, "We come in peace and puns!" The Vlorthun High Command panicked. Their anti-morale cannons, previously effective against rebellion and interpretive dance, were useless against her barrage of one-liners. "I didn't lose my arm for this," she shouted. "I lost it for that," and pointed to a 50-foot hologram of her meme face captioned, "Disarmed but dangerous." Cities fell, not to fire, but to confusion. Soldiers defected in droves, joining flash mobs, reenacting her trial performance from the Krelltak tribunal. Entire battalions refused orders until someone explained what a dad joke was. Meanwhile, Valen kicked in the doors of the Planetary Compliance Council, slapping bureaucrats with paperwork that simply read no. She hijacked their mainframe using a USB coffee stirrer, uploaded a virus made entirely of Vine compilations and failed alien propaganda, and let it loop endlessly until the entire planetary AI begged for a reboot and a nap. The last holdout, a Supreme Order strategist named Kurnex Vital, confronted her in a skyscraper filled with silence diffusers and shame enhancers. "You've destroyed our chain of command," he bellowed. "You've infected our logic nodes with emotional entropy." Valen responded by triggering her arm's emergency pun ejector, launching a glowing hardlight phrase that hovered in the air. "I came, I saw, I made it awkward." Kurnex Vital stared blankly for 2.3 seconds before falling to his knees and muttering, "I can't compute this level of disrespect." His resignation was auto-filed by the building's paperwork AI, which promptly crashed. With Vlorthun neutralized by mass ideological cringe, Valen activated a galactic broadcast. She appeared on-screen in a leather-jacketed tactical jumpsuit, holding a coffee mug labeled "World's Worst Diplomat." Behind her, the RIOT squad posed like a bad rock band in front of the Fallen Compliance Council's logo. "Dear Galaxy," she began, sipping, "you had your chance to win this war with dignity, but you banned laughter, and now you face the consequences. Project Lawfocalypse's go." Over the next 72 hours, dozens of resistance planets overthrew their overlords with nothing but memes, bad puns, and copies of Valen's unauthorized autobiography titled Armed with Sass. The Drakthur High Council attempted a last stand, but their elite soldiers had developed a Pavlovian fear response to knock-knock jokes. Meanwhile, the Galactic Arbitration Corps issued a final ruling. Earth's humor is a mimetic contagion. Ryder is an emotional bioweapon, Avoid direct conversation. Do not engage unless irony-proof. Of course, they engaged. And of course, they fell. Valen's legend expanded faster than tachyon gossip. She became the first human in history to win a war through relentless sarcasm and unapologetic nonsense. Planets held annual pun festivals in her honor. Alien textbooks were revised to include new war doctrines like comedic shock and awe and irony supremacy theory. Her cybernetic arm, once a crude prosthetic, now featured a tactical espresso frother, a holographic eye-roll generator, and a sad trombone emitter for diplomatic shutdowns. At the Galactic Summit held to finally negotiate peace, Valen strutted in wearing a cape made from shredded cease-and-desist orders. The room went silent. Even the chairs looked nervous. She took the podium, leaned forward, and said, "You can. Take my arm, but you'll never take my comedic timing." The entire delegation collapsed in synchronized existential surrender. As the curtain fell on the war, peace arrived, not with a bang, but with a rim shot. And from that day on, across the stars, whenever someone told a pun so bad it caused actual nausea, they'd whisper her name like a warning, like a prayer, like a joke too good to forget. Sergeant Valen Ironhand Rider, Galaxy Breaker, Cringe Commander, and undefeated queen of the Laughocalypse.